Welcome to Dear Paarijaat Podcast. Today, I, Meghranbar, have a most successful guest on the show, Mr. Brent Dowlen. Sir, it's truly an honor to have you on Dear Paarijaat Podcast. Your work in empowering men and helping them discover their purpose is incredibly inspiring. I've always believed that true strength lies in understanding oneself and striving for personal growth. Your dedication to this cause is commendable. Welcome, sir, on our podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation today.
Definitely, sir. So here we proceed with the conversation. One of the things that interviewed me about your journey is your focus on empowering men. What motivated you to specifically target this area and guide men towards discovering their purpose?
So it actually did not start that direction. Um, it started with me really interacting with my wife's friends at get-togethers with we'd have dinner once a week with all of our friends. And my wife had all these female friends who were always very frustrated with their boyfriends or their husbands. And they'd be complaining about this, and I'd start translating their husbands or boyfriends for them. They say, oh, he's doing this and complaining. I'm like, well, what's really going on is this. And they said, you need to write a book to help women translate men. And I thought, that sounds dangerous. That doesn't sound like a great idea. But I started thinking about it. And so instead of writing a book to help women understand men, I started thinking, well, why don't we start addressing some of these issues that are going on that are causing these frustrations? And then the more I started thinking about it, I have a background in youth ministry, working with teenage girls and boys. And I just started thinking about that. And I have 7 nieces. And I started thinking about boys in their life that they're going to start interacting with. And I have 2 daughters. And I thought, how can I improve the situation for everybody? Right. So instead of trying to decipher men for women, I thought, you know what? I see a lot of things going on. I see a lot of healthy young men who don't have healthy perspectives or attitudes because they have a lot of the problems come from not having good role models, good male role models. And so I started to address the problem from there. And that really kind of kicked it all off. That I have 2 young daughters, and like I said, 7 nieces, and I'm like, okay, let's think of a creative solution for this, right? How do we start helping guys who have never had role models, who have never had a positive influence of what it's like to be a healthy guy?
Yeah. In fact, personally talking about myself, I have seen a significant need to support men in a positive way, especially in finding their bigger purpose and working into their lives. Men are often encouraged to fulfill societal roles without much emphasis on personal fulfillment. And that's where we need to focus on, I believe. Uh, Talking about masculinity, what I personally feel is in today's context, it is very crucial to define this particular word, define this particular term to the society. So, how do you define masculinity and how does the definition evolve over time?
That's always a slightly dangerous question, right? Because that, I think, becomes the universal question. I can talk to you and you're going to have one definition of that. And I can talk to, I talk to people all the time on my own show. And I frequently ask men, how do you define masculinity, right? And part of it is we don't have a universal designator of what that actually is. Now, I'm uh, not in vogue with the way I define things sometimes. I think masculinity isn't necessarily, a lot of the confusion comes, people think it's a physical trait, right? It's a physicality, it's a size thing, it's how manly you look, which is all a bunch of crap, right? You have very little control of that. You can go take care of yourself and exercise, but outside of that, you have very little control over how physically big you are, right? That has a lot to do with, your parents and your grandparents and all that. But masculinity isn't so much at a biological level is a chemical compound in your body, right? It's a mix of hormones to a certain degree, just like you have a recipe for a particular style of food, right? It's those hormones coming together to put that recipe together. But masculinity is more than that. It's an attitude, it's a perspective, right? I've worked with guys who were, you know, physically not big guys and like they just oozed masculinity, right? Like there was just an essence about them. Uh like you could just like feel it coming off them. And I've met some really big men who were like, you a little in touch with your feminine side. And you know what? I don't think that's wrong. Like I said, I have lots of women in my life. So I have no problem with guys being at least in touch with some femininity. But it's a mix of traits, right? If you start looking at what we really have defined as masculinity historically as we go through the years, you start to look at the people we look up to, right? In American culture, I grew up in a John Wayne, Rambo kind of society where those were men's men, right? Well, what did they have, right? They were solid to their word, right? They had integrity and honesty. They were uncompromising, right? They had a hill they would die on. This is how they stood on things. This is where they were. And they would just, I mean, they would die on that hill if they needed to. They had an instinctive protective nature of those who were less powerful or less capable than them, right? You never saw John Wayne beat a kid, right? John Rambo didn't kill a bunch of little kids, right? They had an instinct of nature to protect those who couldn't stand for themselves. They had a purpose and a mission that they aligned with. This is who they were. This is how they were, and they would fight and die for that. Right? They knew where they stood and they knew where they were going. And so it really the way I define masculinity comes into a mix of all those things. I look at all those traits that we go, yes, this is masculine, this is manly. We look at those men and go, they inspire me. I want to be them. I want to be like them. And so I think really, I mean, once you get outside of the physical components, right? Obviously, women have some testosterone in their bodies, not very much, but they have some testosterone and they can have some masculine qualities, some masculine traits to them. It doesn't make them a man, right? So you get outside into the physical, you have to be a guy. You have to have that right chemical cocktail in our body, but you also have to develop these traits that they're highly sought after, right? That desire to lead and explore to conquer. That's a masculine trait. There's nothing wrong with it. It's how the world has expanded across the entirety of the history of the world. Is men went, there's something beyond this water that I'm seeing right here. I'm gonna go find it. Right? There's something on that mountain. I want to see what's on that mountain. And it's just this combination of traits that we look up to a lot of times. I'm sure that's not a really good explanation, but in working with men for many years now, it's like trying to come to a simple explanation of it is hard, right? Because there are some inherently masculine traits, but it's a combination of these things that make you masculine.
You really summed up all the experiences which you hold it right now. And what I believe that masculinity is not just about testosterone. There is more far world behind it, more things which are yet unexplored, things which are need to be discovered more and more. So, Samikam, concluding it in fluent words of mine, I would say that masculinity is like embracing one's strength and while also being open to vulnerability and growth. It's evolved from traditional notions of toughness to a more holistic views that includes emotional intelligence and self-awareness. So, talk about emotional aspect. We live in a society only like in more of a day where we expect men not to cry. It's kind of an emotion. So, how do you feel about on this particular thing? Do we expect them to cry, or do we expect them to be rough and tough or kind of thing?
Let me make sure I'm understanding the question right. How do we men, are we dealing with emotional intelligence or EQ, right? How do we expect
Yeah,
men to act? Uh,
yeah,
and stop me if I'm answering the wrong question here. But
you're going right.
emotional intelligence is interesting, right? Because it's a double-edged sword for most men. Society says we need to be more in touch with our feelings, which for men is not necessarily a natural premise, right? I'm the first one to say men have feelings. All men have feelings. We experience feelings just like women do. We are raised from a young age to control them, to manage them. And fortunately, that's one of the hardwiring of a male brain is different than the hardwiring of a female brain in the way it processes things. The best example I can give is men are like waffles. Like we have these small compartments and we compartmentalize everything. We store data that way and we go from one to the other and deal with one subject at a time. Whereas women are more like a plate of spaghetti. You start at one end of the noodle and it touches everything else as it goes through the plate, right? And because our brains are hardwired different, men are able to compartmentalize those emotions and the feelings and the things that happen that cause strong emotion in them. And so society says we need to jump into more emotional, right? We need to express our emotions. The problem is A is not a natural instinct for us. B, it's not a learned instinct for us because we're told, no, no, you have to be manly. No, you have to be masculine. No, no, you can't cry. No, you can't do that. Right. And so from a very young age, we're taught a stoic concept without any context on it. I'm very much so believe that men should have, we attribute it to stoicism, at least here in America, a lot of times become a popular byword in our culture now. But men should have control. We need to process those emotions. We need to find a healthy way to process emotions, but we don't let the emotions override us, which is often mistaken as, oh, well, you're denying your emotions. No, we're just not being ruled by them. Because when we start to show that emotional side of us, like I said, it's a double-edged sword. Oh, we want you to be more emotional. Express yourself. Men instantly lose respect from the people around them the minute they start to become overly emotional. It's not even just other men that see us as less because of it. Women lose respect for us the minute we let those emotions start to come out in an uncontrolled manner, right? If you look at a man who has an explosive temper, women don't respect him, men don't respect him, right? So where does that leave that man? Because for men, respect is more important than most things, right? We can process a lot of things. Respect actually our need for respect actually outweighs our need for love, even. So that man with an explosive temper, nobody respects him. He's automatically on the outs. He's automatically pushed to the fringes of society because that's socially unacceptable. But the same thing happens with a guy who actually lets his emotions out and breaks down and starts to cry under the pressure he's under. And men tend to carry a lot more pressure. We carry our stress differently than women. And if we let that out and we start to have a right, we have a good cry, right? We'll have a good cry. The women around us automatically no longer respect us. They can say they want us to show our emotions, but the minute like that kind of emotion comes out, because men deal with a lot of stress, right? We have sadness too. We have hard days, we have bad days. Uh, I know so many men who every day they're just scraping by when it comes to like their mental and emotional state. They're just getting by. It's, and I think we're going to talk about it a little bit later. It's like psychologically, men are really hurting these days. And so the minute they break down and let that come out outside of somewhere like therapy, where you're just one on one with a therapist, society loses all respect for that man. And so it's this horrible thing because we need to deal with our emotions. If we don't find a healthy outlet to deal with those emotions, to recognize them, to address them, to acknowledge them, and then to process them, it will eat us from the inside out. But if we let them out the way society these days will tell us, oh, yeah, you can do that, we're automatically shunned by the people around us and by society at large because the respect for that person disappears. So it's a really hard line right now for men in modern society to, it's like, I need to process this. I need to talk about this. I need to, but like, the minute I do, so it's one of those fine lines. I think men need to master their emotional intelligence. You have to get a hold of it because prisons are full of people who lost control of their emotions, right? A bad decision in the heat of a moment, compounded by stress and depression and trauma, and all of a sudden, one bad decision and you're in jail for the next 15 years. Prisons are full of that. Guys who just lost control for that split second. And so we need to learn to handle that. And for every guy, you're going to find a different outlet, right? Some guys take solace in the gym, some guys take solace in some solitude, but you have to acknowledge it, process it in a healthy way, and then move forward.
Definitely, the thing you mentioned about men and interpretation. First of all, I would say it is really a scary part for us men in the whole society where we are expected a lot of things. We were expected as a provider of the services, provider of the resources to be the backbone of the family, and yet we have to somehow hide our emotions or restrict our emotions because when we do it, the society or the structure is somehow so biased that as you mentioned, we don't get respect in return. We lose the respect the moment we lose the control over our emotions. So definitely, we need upgradation in the structure of the society, in the elements around the environment. But somehow we also expect man to be emotionally intelligent. And we have seen there are people, especially being feminist or who are supporting females or who are supporting all other things. But when we talk about men, they just expected it. No, they can handle themselves. But yeah, depression is really uh, it exists mostly in the minds. Uh, most of the times when they're working in the work life experiences, they experience the stress. All we need is love and respect, and that's how all this kind of trap zone becomes in the society. And people like you, Mr. Dolan, and you're doing a great job. Please, you are inspiration for many of us.
Thank you. That's it's always fun for me to actually get to talk to somebody from a different country because we get there's a difference in perspective between different cultures, right? I don't know exactly what this current state looks like in other places in the world where I'm not, right? So I can speak to American culture, but I think it's universal from the men I get to talk to. Uh, and so it's like, it's interesting to hear. It's like, this is a universal issue. It's not a specific to a nation or a specific culture. It's a universal issue. Men are struggling around the world with all the same problems, whether we know it or not.
Completely, I agree for the same thing.
So I'm excited for
It's
this
whether,
conversation today. Thank you.
yeah, uh, I absolutely agree for this. Whether it's India or whether it's America or we talk about UK, any country, all the structures running on the same path. Men are expected to be the providers, and in return, they are expected to be rough and tough for the society. Uh, they need, everyone in the world needs love, but what do we get in return? That's where comes mental health. This is an issue worldwide. Speaking of growth, the current state of men's loneliness and isolation is concerning, definitely. What are your thoughts on this, and how can men overcome these challenges? We discussed about the mental health, but if you can highlight the ways men can overcome these challenges.
Mental health is a big concern for me. I'm actually trying to feature that a lot more on my show this year because it's not getting better. In fact, all of the studies are showing us that it is actually getting worse universally for men. This state of isolation, the state of feeling lonely and feeling disconnected and disenfranchised entirely it's at an all-time high if we look at the actual numbers on this. And this is something I review a lot because you will find men surrounded in groups of people who still feel utterly alone. It's incredible, and it's something that I have often dealt with myself. I tend to struggle a little bit with some depressive states when things are not in alignment, when I'm struggling with stuff, got stuff going on. I tend to isolate, I tend to pull in, and I can be in a large group of people and feel very isolated. And so when I started studying this and looking more into it, it's like, oh, this resonates. I can look back at my life and see this progression and see this habit where you'll just see, like, you take it in groups of faith, right? You see men going to their religious gatherings and there's all these people around them, but so many men in that group feel absolutely alone. A recent study, supposedly, I haven't managed to verify the study, so I hate to quote things I haven't verified yet. I came across it. I'm actually looking for the study right now, said that men need to gather with a small group of friends, like 3 to 4 friends they're really close with, actually about twice a week for their own mental health, which is far more than we even thought. This idea that it's, like I said, I need to go verify the study. I think Harvard did it. But this idea that men actually need to meet with a group of friends twice a week on a regular basis to help negate this feeling. I don't know any guy who has that kind of time, honestly. But I do think it's necessary, and I think it's going to be one of those things that we actually have to start doing more with men, right? And as it's counterculture for men because, right, we go to work, we go take care of our responsibilities at home, right? Whether that's a family, whether that, and that might be taking care of your parents, right? We go to work, we do our jobs there, we pay our bills, we take care of our respective responsibilities. And at the end of the day, it's very rare that men actually take much time for themselves. But I think with this shift in loneliness and isolation for men, we're going to hit a point where it starts becoming necessary, where we're going to have to try and get through to men and convince them it's like, no, at least once a week, if not twice, you need to be meeting with a group of men. But how we overcome that gets complicated because we all have friends we grew up with at some point that are still essentially the same age as when we made friends with them. We have a bunch of men who have never grown up and never passed that age, right? And most guys have those couple friends that you get together and what do they talk about? They talk about, oh, the glory days of when you were in school together coming up or whatever, right? They never grew past that point. Those groups are not going to change the situation. Getting men to open up to the idea of small men's groups where you actually connect at a deeper level is a really, I've worked with some guys who that's what they do, and I'm just in awe of what they're doing because trying to convince men. It's like, no, you need a group of friends that you connect with at a more than just level that you actually can talk to and share concerns and problems and not have them be like, don't be a little girl about it, right? That's not going to help. We've got to start getting into, what's the word I want to, communion with 3 or 4 men in our lives where we can sit down and go, oh, man, I'm having a really hard week. My kid's doing this. My wife's not happy about this. And I'm stressed and I'm not sure what to do in this situation. I'm not sure how to process this. And then have those 3 or 4 other guys who are like, you know what? My wife and I went through that. Or, oh, you know what? My kids and I did that. My wife and I still make a habit of going to marriage classes. Uh, we've been married. We celebrate our 23rd anniversary, and we still make a habit of going to marriage classes every year together. And the last one we went to was a young married parents of really young kids. And our kids were the oldest in the group by far. But it was funny to watch these young parents be like, oh no, what am I going to do? And be able to be far enough along in my life to turn around and go, you know what, it's okay. Yes, your child's going to do that, right? But that relief I was able to give that young parent because I had already been down that road with my kid, like you can immediately see the sense of, I'm going to survive this. My kid's not some weirdo because they eat the glue or whatever, right? And we need to get to a point where we're doing that with groups of men, where we have groups of men of mixed ages getting together and going, I understand you're stressed and it seems really hard right now. And you're right, it is. However, you are going to get through it. And the way you're feeling, the way you're thinking, that's normal. I felt that way. He felt that way. He's going to feel that way when he gets there, right? Where you can actually have that mentoring conversation. We've lost a lot of this concept of mentorship with men. That's really the bigger answer for that is we need a mixed age group of men getting together on a regular basis with a mentorship relationship where you can go, hey, it gets better than this, right? Hey, this is going on in my life. Is that weird? Is this, or hey, I'm just angry all the time and I don't know what to do with that. Where someone who's a little farther in their trip can go, you know what? I used to be angry all the time. So let's look at what you're passionate about. Let's look at your hobbies and see if we can find a way to help you take care of that because we know you don't want to bring that home. And I think that's how we start to deal with this. We have to actually have really legitimate connections with other men. But getting them to do that, that's a whole nother conversation. Actually getting men to open up to that concept is a work in progress for sure.
Definitely, I really expect that hopefully it's kind of personal therapy for a person when they try to do such things. And I expect that in the upcoming decades, this could be made a compulsory routine by the government or something like that because this situation is getting worse day by day. So let's hope activists like you, activists like people around us, they uh, identify this situation, identify this problem, and get onto a common solution which is beneficial for all. When we talk about men, as you mentioned, most of the time it happens that in a whole gathering of multiple people, they still they feel isolated. They still they feel the feeling of depression. When we talk about men, what we basically do right now, which is very harmful in one aspect, but it is the most common practice which is being practiced all over the world. That is in the state of depression or in the state of emotional uncomfortable when a man is emotionally unstable. What he prefers is he tries to overwork. He tries to work more and more. He tries to focus on his professional life more and more. This also worsens the situation he considers as a man that by diverting ourselves to the to our work, to a work life, it would remove this situation to solve this problem. But that's not the solution for it. We need to look into the problem at a deeper level to solve it instead of focusing on such.
You see a lot of men just dive into something, right? We aren't, because we're not taught to deal with those emotions. I saw a post on social media the other day or something. It's like he'll never complain. He'll work harder, he'll work longer, the music volume will get louder, the workouts will get more intense, the days will get longer. And that's the big red flags, is we're just going to try and outwork it all, right? That's our go-to solution. We're going to outwork these feelings, we're going to go outwork these problems. We're not going to vent, we're not going to connect with other people, we're not going to tell people, we're just going to work harder. That's our go-to solution. And it's been that way for generations, but it's not solving the problem.
Yes, I completely agree, sir. In my experience, staying motivated and continuously learning are key to personal development. How do you stay motivated and keep growing in your own journey? We would like to know about your personal life. How do you manage these things?
Staying motivated actually isn't really hard for me. um I have this concept of one, right? With everything I do, for me, staying motivated isn't actually that big of concern, because I have this concept of one. That's what I call it. Everything I do, whether I'm recording a podcast for my show or as a guest, or if I'm putting out a new piece of content, one is the measure. If one guy sees that, hears that, right, piece of content, and it gave them what they needed in that moment to take that next step, find the courage to connect with somebody, gives them a tool they needed to, be a better husband or a better father or just a better person in general. If it won, that's the only number I ask for, right? I know I can't change the entire world. I know I can't reach every man. But if I can, with any piece of giving content, touch one life, then that content's worthwhile. Then I did what I needed to do that day. Right. And so when I get these little filters down where people are like, oh man, I saw that video, or I heard that podcast, or I saw that post on Instagram, and it just really, I'm pretty sure most of them don't listen to my podcast. I know a lot of people who are very close to me who are like, I talk to you all the time. I don't need to listen to your podcast, right? So when I get that one connection that goes, man, I needed that. That was so true. And like I said, it comes from unlikely places. My sister emailed me after one of my podcasts. My sister, I didn't like, my main demographic is men, but my sister emailed me after one podcast where we were talking about just time management, and how, because she's a teacher and she was feeling rushed and struggling with managing everything she was trying to do with volunteer work and being a teacher and everything else. And we talked about a time management system she had never heard of, and it clicked, right? I had a guy at one of our conferences who, after the conference, he just threw his arms around me. He said, you saved my life. It's like, no, no, man, you showed up. You showed up. And tomorrow you're going to have to do something with this, because the good feelings end because the event's over, right? Tomorrow, when you go back to your real life, it's what you do with what we talked about this weekend, right? And his life, that's a whole nother story, has just changed radically. And so if you look at it from that scale, for me, just one, right? Just one. And I know somebody out of all those downloads heard something that resonated with them. I mix that with my own why because I think having a big why is the key to a lot of that. If you're very clear on what your why is, that personal motivation, why you get up and do this every day, why you choose to do this, put in all this effort, right? I mean, you've got your podcast. It's a lot of work, right? It's more than a little thing. Why you do it every day has to be bigger than a fleeting thought, than something that's transient. And so when you tie in a really strong why and then adjust your perspective to one, it's easy. Like getting up and doing this every day, super easy. As far as like staying motivated, I'm excited to get up and work on content. I'm excited to get up and do interviews. I'm excited to have an opportunity, and that's the way I see it. I have an opportunity to touch lives that were never possible before this day and age, right? You and I are talking across the world. That's amazing. I'm a tech guy, and I still think that's amazing because I can have this conversation with you, which means that there are people in your listenership that I will never get to meet, that I will never get to actually be involved in their lives, which would be amazing to get to be involved in their lives because they're amazing people. But there are people that I will never get to meet that hopefully heard one thing in this whole conversation and went, man, I needed to hear that today. Right? That just the possibility of that excites me because a lot of times when guys are struggling, that's what they need one. They need one person to actually care. They need one person to tell them you're going to make it. They need one person who actually goes, you know what? I get it. It's hard. The day is rough, but you've survived worse and you're going to make it. Having that one voice who will root for you, that one voice who will say, you got this, is often the distant difference between a really bad day and a really good day, right? It's all it takes, right? You've experienced it yourself. You get that one person who smiles at you. You're having a rough day. You get that random person you see on the street and they smile at you when you walk by for no reason at all. And you're just like, oh, I needed that so bad. So I get so excited about doing this.
Definitely, I really resonated with what you just said. Talking about my own experiences, one time it happened that I randomly posted two of my poems which I wrote, two of my poetries. I posted them on social media. So what happened? After many months, I just checked in my LinkedIn account. So there was a comment of a one person. He stated that, "Thank you, Mayan, for writing this poetry. This motivated me to start working on a project or start writing my book again, which I stopped many years back. And he literally published that book in the upcoming next 2 3 months, and that somehow motivated me to write more and more poetry. And then I started beginning publishing them online, and now I'm becoming a established poet and author in that genre. So I believe that was that one person who somehow motivated me to uh, open up in the social media. That's how it began. And secondly, talking about my podcast, when I started this podcast, I didn't expect the people to listen to me. I was not that kind of person who would expect a mass audience to focus on the voice of a single person. What I thought was, even if one person would listen to my episode, even if one person would be listening to me, would be following my advices, would be interested in knowing what I have for them, I would continue publishing the episode. I would continue working on this podcast. And to my amazement, what happened was now not even a single day has passed with zero listeners. My podcasts are growing day by day with a very huge number, you can say. So that's, and it's not just from the people who are listening from India. I was amazed when there are people from UK, people from Australia, uh, Germany, France, all over the world. People are listening to me. People are interested in listening to the advices of my guests. They're so interested, and it's only take a one person. It's only take a one sentence. It only takes just one thing to get motivated in a life. It's really inspiring. Only one person could be inspiring for you.
Hmm. It's amazing, right? Because we are in a day and age where you can reach so many people, right? I was blown away. I was going through my podcast stats once, and you know, in that month, I was in 40 different countries. I had downloads in 40 different countries in that one month, and I'm like, but I'm me. Why? Why would anybody care, right? And to think that somewhere there's somebody in the world listening in some country I've never been to me, which I still deal with imposter syndrome all the time, right? I'm a guy on a journey. I'm just trying to help other guys go there with me as I go. I don't have all the answers. I know that. And so the fact that anybody is listening, right? When you look at those downloads, you're like, oh my goodness, someone listened to my show. Somebody, and then you start looking even deeper and you're like, oh my goodness, people are listening to this all over the world. That's mind blowing to me every single day. But it's so rewarding to think, hey, somewhere somebody got something out of this. And so you just keep going and go, hey, one, right? Find that one. And hopefully today is a better day because they listened to my show or because they read that poetry or that post or, I read stuff on platforms all the time and I'm just like, wow, right? And people have no idea when they post some of these things, the reach that will have and the lives that can be impacted, which is just truly awesome.
That's really what life is all about. To continue working just for that one moment in life. It's really inspiring. So covering about now, I would like to know about political aspect somewhat. So if we talk about political beliefs can sometimes lead to polarization and strained relationships. So how do you think these beliefs affect families and communities? If you can explain it in short.
So we're going to talk political ideologies. Uh, Political ideologies are one of those weird things, right? Unfortunately, it seems that it doesn't matter where you go, what country you're in, political ideologies are becoming increasingly polarizing. Uh, I know my country is just insane right now with the polarity on this two-party set. But it seems everyone I talk to around the world, political ideologies are becoming more and more polarizing, which is a little scary to me because we've also, as a people in general, started to lose the ability to have civil discourse and disagreement. Right? I don't have to agree with everybody. In fact, I'm kind of counting on the fact that I don't agree with everybody. If I don't agree with you on something, that's okay. You're you, I'm me. We're allowed to have our opinions. That's a great thing as a human being. And if everybody was just like me, life would be very boring, right? That's where we get the best parts of life is all the differences individually in people around the world. From person to person, everybody has their ideals, their beliefs, their concepts, their thoughts, their personalities, and it makes the world amazing. But as political ideologies have become more divisive, uh, we've stopped having the ability to have a conversation with people and disagree and still be okay. Like, no, you know what? We don't have to agree on this. It's cool. I have some of my closest friends, and there are things that we vehemently disagree on, but I don't care. I still love that friend. They're still the closest people to me, and we certainly don't see eye to eye on some things, but that's okay. I don't love that person's political ideologies or thoughts. I care about that person, right? I still want them in my life. Just because we have a different opinion doesn't matter. But we're losing our ability to have those conversations. More and more with political ideologies, we're going, it's my way or the highway. And people are getting just more and more divisive, saying, oh, well, if you disagree with me on this, then we can't be friends, right? We can't talk. You're automatically lesser than me because you believe differently than me, which is dangerous, whether that's politics or faith, it doesn't matter. Those two things alone have more divisive power than almost anything, right? I don't have to agree with a person's faith. I don't have to agree with their politics to respect the person as a human being, as an individual who has the right to their own thoughts and beliefs and ideas. But more and more, we're seeing that dividing line of believe what I believe or think what I think, or we can't be friends. We can't get along. Like we won't even talk to each other. And that is seeping into we're starting to see, at least I know in the United States, we're starting to see families torn apart by political ideologies. Uh, I'm 44 years old. I remember back to Ronald Reagan. That was the late 80s, I believe, for presidency of the United States. I have never seen this country this divided over political candidates and political offices. Like it's really become very ugly here, this conflict over political ideologies, but it's splitting down into families and communities where you have families who have such split beliefs on this and are so polarized. They feel it so adamantly and are so deeply involved with it. And I think it's really important that people in general are involved with politics, that they're educated on politics, that they know, what's going on in their communities, in their states, in their countries, and they're acquainted with issues and the candidates and are aware of what's happening. You can't have a healthy government without it. We don't have a healthy government, but we're a bad example of that right now. Um, but while I applaud the fact that, excuse me, the last 10 years, more and more people have taken interest in politics and knowing, or at least having an idea of what's happening, it's now become a dividing line that's just separating communities and families because we can't go, you like that guy, I like this guy. Cool. We'll still have coffee. I don't care. We just won't talk about that today. Right. I don't, it's hurting us a lot because we're losing track of the fact that we have far more in common than we disagree on things. Uh, if you and I don't agree on something, right, I would still love to sit down and have coffee with you and we can discuss it or not discuss it. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to disrespect your beliefs on things. I don't think that's right. I don't think there's a reason to. And it doesn't encompass all of you just because you and I don't agree on something, right? To me, that's normal discourse. That's the way life works. But that's not what we're seeing these days. Now it's
Definitely.
like, yeah,
It's
now it's
very,
like, go ahead.
yeah, it's like really harmful for the society, I would say. Uh, Talking about America, it is one of the oldest democracy of the world. And when we talk about India, we are the biggest democracy in the world. And yet the problem arises in both the countries. Like here in India, also the situation is not, I would say, much good talking about political ideologies. And this situation prevails all over the world. And everywhere we somehow see the same situation. And we need to derive upon this solution for it. And one of those solutions could be to spreading more and more love, I believe. And the more love we spread, the more we rely on our core values. That's what I feel we need to realize this importance that political ideologies and personal lives are different from both of the cases. We can interact with the people. with different political ideologies, but same personal interest or would like to meet and drive on something valuable. So lastly, sir, I would like to know what message or word of encouragement you have for men who are on a journey of self-discovery or personal growth.
Don't give up. The world is not going to support you on this journey. Culture is not going to support you on this journey. It's part of the reason that I created the Fallible Man, my show, because culturally we don't support men in this particular thing, in self-discovery, personal growth, and development. We don't. We're told to get through school and then go get a job and raise a family. That's our job. Provide and protect, raise a family, do that. And that's it. That's where improvement stops at a societal level. So my encouragement is don't give up, because you're more than that. You were made for so much more than just to go to work and take care of your family. And taking care of your family, if you have a family, right? If you're married or married with kids, whatever, is one of the most important and valuable roles you'll ever have, but it's not the end of who you are. You are unique in your experiences, you're unique in your thought processes and the things that have shaped your life, and you have something of value to offer the world at a much bigger level. So don't stop. Don't give up. I know it can be a really lonely road to walk, because society's going to tell you, is like, what are you doing? It broke my heart when a guy told me one day, he was asking about what I do. He's like, what, there's more than that? Guy's 56 years old. He's like, there's more than that? Yes, there's so much more than that. You were made for something so much more powerful and so much more important than just to take care. And don't get me wrong, like, my favorite titles are husband and father. Those are the most important things in my life. But this is a part of who I am, and this makes me stronger and more capable to live the rest of my purpose. Right? It doesn't detract from it, but it's not the only thing there is. It just makes me stronger to do that, to have that support and have those people. But most people are not going to support you in this. So don't give up. Don't quit. There are resources out there. There are people out there who will encourage you. There are people who will walk with you. Don't quit, because the world needs the man you're meant to be.
Yeah, it's really encouraging for me just right now when you mentioned about this thing. I feel motivated by what you said. And I would encourage men to embrace vulnerability and seek support, set meaningful goals, and stay committed to their growth journey. Every step forward, no matter how small or big, it counts. So thank you so much, sir, for sharing your valuable insights and experience with us. Your dedication to empowering men is making a positive impact, and I'm sure our listeners have gained valuable takeaways from our conversation today. And I would like to mention we have one of the longest episodes till now on our podcast. It is crossed 1 hour time, and we are very proud to say that. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Uh, Hope you have a great day, and thank you, audience. And please listen to the podcast, Nisa. It's been a pleasure to talking to you, and I look forward to seeing the continued growth and impact of your podcast and the work you are doing.
Thank you.